So this episode of the Nick, Dick, and Paul show is actually going to be called the Nick, Paul, and Tim show. Did I get that right? Or the Nick, Tim, and Paul show? Which has a better ring to it?
It doesn't rhyme either way. That's the problem.
Yeah. Sorry, Tim. This is just going to be a one-time thing.
Sorry.
Our guest, we have a guest today, which we're very excited about. It's Tim Wu, who I've known for 15 years or something like that now. We both look like we've aged very well.
Thank you.
You have your 462nd book out this week. It feels like that. It's called The Age of Extraction, How Tech Platforms Conquered the Economy and Threaten Our Future Prosperity. So one little fun fact is when I wrote the Twitter book in 2013, you wrote the review in the Washington Post about it.
It's true, I did.
You
I
were
remember
very,
it well.
very nice about it.
Was he? No, that's
It was a great book.
Yeah.
It was a great book.
Thank you.
The movie was great too.
Yeah, well, that's a whole separate story.
It got me into that story, that book of yours. And then I also reviewed some of the books written by the Twitter founders with the knowledge of what had actually happened.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of helped me, have a little more insight there.
Their version of history that was not so true.
Yeah.
Less filtered.
All right, so this is actually your fourth book or fifth?
Fourth solo authored book.
Fourth solo authored book.
Yeah.
What made you want to do this one? What was the moment?
Well, I guess
Cool. Let's just back up and give everyone your a little brief resume. So
Sure.
You're a professor at Columbia.
Uh-huh.
You came up with the term net neutrality.
Uh-huh.
You worked in the Biden administration.
Yeah.
And anywhere else? Obama too?
Yes. Both
Not
ways.
Trump.
Not Trump.
Did you have an opportunity?
No.
Okay.
I think for one of actually, I was in the Obama White House, and I had some kind of thing where I could have actually technically stayed, because I think I was it's hard to explain, but it didn't really seem like the thing to do.
It was like a technicality where they were like they couldn't evict you, like squatters' rights or something?
I just wasn't fired. How's that?
Yeah, yet.
And I never got fired. For all I know, I still work there. But someone said, you should stay and just watch and see what's going on.
And write a book about it.
And I was like, I don't know. It seems weird to just be hanging around. Well,
Yes, wait to see what happens.
yeah.
What was it that got you into deciding to do this book?
I was interested in going back to the early days of, the internet revolution, not the 70s, but like the 90s and thousands, and trying to figure out what happened to that idea that the internet was going to make everybody rich and that it was going to bring democracy to every country on earth, and every creative person was going to have their outlet. I mean, some of that a little bit happened versus today, where I feel that the sensation is that the main tech platforms have sort of grown to dominate and extract a lot from the economy. So I kind of wanted to tell that story. It's also a third in a trilogy. My first book, I'll go through all my books, but I wrote two other books about basically the tech industries in the United States in the 20th century. And this is kind of the end of it coming into the 21st.
Do you, when you look back, given that you've been there from the beginning, are you shocked at where we are, or is this kind of where you hoped we weren't and we ended up, or how do you feel about it?
I guess disappointed, is the right word. I mean, part of when I write a book, I'm trying to understand, what my own feelings about things. I think I was incredibly optimistic in the 90s, early thousands. I kind of bought into it all.
Were you optimistic in that?
No.
I guess I was. I believe what Clay Shirky said, like the power of love is taken over, and it was. I did believe in it. I thought that we were moving into a different stage of doing things. I mean, I don't think I was totally naive, but I feel that I had some faith that really this was going to be great for humanity, and also the 90s in general. I was very optimistic. It felt like the Berlin Wall had fallen down, and and we'd solved all the problems of capitalism and socialism by coming up with like the third way. Do you remember Bill Clinton?
Yep.
And everybody was going to be rich and everything was going to be great. And I kind of feel 21st century has been a little bit rocky. So
A little bit.
Just a bit.
Just enough so you'd notice. Yeah.
So my book is kind of like the explanation of what happened in tech, a little bit the whole economy as well.
We were talking on an earlier podcast about Paul has this whole theory about how we regulate all these industries. Not regulate. Well, how would you describe it? About how we just let technology do whatever it is.
Oh, just the idea that many of the things that technology executives, founders, CEOs take for granted are just not true in other sectors. That they're essentially given free rein, where if we were launching new drugs, or if we were experimenting with new forms of chemicals and so on, there's a much more complex process in terms of being able to unleash them on the broader population. And instead, we're the test, right? The launch is on us. And my argument is that it's a kind of path dependency thing, where because it doesn't feel like it's hurt us yet, that has kind of become the entrenched mode by which things get launched, just because it has always worked, not because it was a thoughtful process, but because it hasn't hurt us yet.
I think you're right about that. And I also think there's a path dependency in the sense that because it was the darling of the 90s, because everyone was so upbeat about it, because people thought the Google founders were some really great guys.
You talk about that in the book. You talk about like how they had this vision for the future that was going to be amazing, and then
I mean, I think they were sincere, honestly. I think they meant well. I think that they also felt they had to be extraordinarily wealthy too. And so when they had all these big things about what Google was going to do to serve the public and so forth. Mm-hmm. When it came time to go to have a business model, even though they'd written a thing about how advertising was the death of good search, they went with advertising.
Right.
And then they never did. They just took the standard, Delaware corporation, we're going to have to do quarterly reports and have this constant pressure to make more money and profit and revenue. And I describe in the book how they wrote a letter to the shareholders for the IPO.
Yeah.
You remember this letter?
Yeah, I remember the letter.
And it's all about how we're not going to be a normal company and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of good vibes, a lot of, and like people like me, I guess, sort of believe it. And, one lesson I draw from this book is that over time, basically structure beats out good intentions. They didn't really set things differently.
I also think, and you touch on this a little bit, but I mean, I also think it's like, what's the old Mike Tyson line? Is everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face or something like this? I said every good companies have a plan until they get punched in the face by capital markets, which is kind of to your point about structure, that you can have all of these good intentions, but once you're on the hamster wheel of quarterly earnings and analyst reports and recommendations and institutional investors, that's the punch in the face. It's very difficult as a modern 20th, 21st century organization to hold on to those idealist principles in the face of that, because the system just doesn't permit it. It actually punishes it.
I mean, there are a few. I'm kind of impressed by Wikipedia.
Not a public company, though.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Right.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, there was this moment where when we think about Jimmy Wales, let's say 2002, he basically had this little button that said Billionaire on it.
Mm-hmm. And he never pressed it.
He didn't push it. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if he woke up some days and maybe I'll push this button. But he never pushed it.
But he's one person.
Yeah, he had good self-control, I guess.
But why is there, can you name another other than Wikipedia?
It's challenging.
Yeah.
I guess the founders of, hold on a second. The fact I'm having trouble.
For those listening at home, Tim is thinking right now.
But the point being, though, it's really unusual.
It's really unusual.
It's just really unusual for people to survive that punch in the face.
Well, yes. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is if they really wanted to, they could have tried something a little different.
Meaning Google's?
Google could have tried something different. All these guys could have tried, maybe there's other companies like Patagonia. It's not a tech company.
Yeah.
That the first came to mind that adapted. And I say that it actually gets back to your point about regulation or lack thereof. Ultimately these companies have become this sort of essential infrastructure of American commerce. Mm-hmm. Not unlike the trains another generation or stock market. All those things are heavily regulated because or electric networks, because they're in a position to just take from everybody so easily.
Right.
And we have sort of let that go a very long time.
Which is kind of tied to the net neutrality argument, right? I mean, that's a similar point with respect to it being a common infrastructure, which was the point you made from the beginning on this, and therefore it's a public good in a sense.
Yeah,
that belongs to be treated as such. They should be treated as such.
I mean, one of the ideas of this book, and another reason I wrote about it, I've always been interested in basically the spaces that every civilization have where things happen. In fact, I had a sentence in my mind when I was starting to write this book, which is, everything has to happen somewhere. I don't know if it's a good sentence, but it's like the sentence I started writing. And I kind of believe that places that things happen have a effect on what kind of civilization you have. Like the ancient Greeks had this big square in the middle. Everyone voted, whatever. And so our life is online is, well, I guess like Facebook and Instagram and Amazon. Like that's kind of our central square. But it's a lot different. It's privatized, extractive. Drives you crazy. So anyway, that's part of what I'm interested in.
But I guess the question is, does it play out? Is this all negative, all positive, mostly negative for society? Like compared to the square. I mean, I have my own theories, obviously, but I'm sure Paul does too. But like, what do you come away with?
I mean, it's a mix because you have to have these spaces. You had to have these hosts, these platforms that make everything happen. Mm-hmm. The question is, the reason I wrote the book, the message is, these things are essential, but should they be allowed to just take as much money as they want from everybody else? You know what I mean? I mean, Amazon Marketplace being a good example. Amazon Marketplace is the most successful market in, I guess, human history now. It's like 1 million sellers on it and so forth. So it is, in a way, like obviously a good thing that as consumers we're able to have it and sellers can reach people. But, over the years, Amazon has just been dialing the fees. One of their fees is, the sponsored ads. You search on Amazon, you get those, little weird, like they make it hard to find out what's really the good product or whatever. Amazon made $56 billion on those last year. So like double the revenue of every newspaper on earth, just for that little janky thing, weird trick, I guess, that actually makes search worse.
It makes it so much worse.
Yeah. So, part of the question is are they like the electric? Like, what if we had the electric network and we let them charge whatever they want?
Which we do in places, obviously, with consequences, like parts of Texas and what have you. But yeah, I think that's true. But I mean, and you kind of touch on this, but is the counterfactual, is the world worse without someone controlling that platform? Is it worse for the sellers? Do the sellers care enough about this problem? Or is it a problem that we care more about in the, in the abstract and the aggregate, whereas the individuals are like, you know what, that may be, but I'm perfectly happy where I am.
Well, based on what I look at, the sellers aren't too happy about it in the sense that when they started, a lot of them in, say, 2012, Amazon was taking between 15 and 20%.
Yeah. And
now they're taking 50, 60%. The margins are worse than brick and mortar. So they really care. In fact, it's mainly Chinese, linked importers who've been able to survive. And if you care about like class issues, I think in 2012, Amazon offered this promise that maybe, people all over the country could like starting, but it could be like a real class builder of a kind of wealthy small business class. But I think that is kind of gone. So that's the broader consequence. It's not like one you can see people getting electrified or run over, but you do see the sort of
electrified and run over.
Yeah.
But it is like you can see this hole where there could have been this sort of nation of small businesses and vendors and so forth.
But isn't that the story in a sense of like capital markets in general? Like I'm thinking of examples in financial markets where obviously there are intermediaries, the intermediaries consolidate, they have visibility into order flow, and they use that visibility into order flow to become fantastically profitable. And we can name a host of companies in the financial services industry that do this. So in a sense, it's not particularly surprising that that's the approach Amazon has taken, in particular because Jeff came from that background. That's what he used to do.
Right.
And this is a point I think people miss, is that he used to be the kind of person who was looking inside of capital markets and saying, how do I take advantage of this? And so is Is it shame on us for not realizing this was exactly the path that was sort of inevitable, given the guys running the service?
I mean, I think it'd be shame on us if we don't do something about it, I guess.
Okay.
If we just say, okay, this is fine.
Okay, but you worked in 2 administrations.
Uh-huh.
Why has nothing been done?
That is a great question. I mean, the most basic starting point, backing even off from this utility kind of regulation stuff, would just be like passing a privacy law. And, they've been talking. You ask Americans on the street, take some polls, like, would you like some better privacy online? Probably a huge majority would say yes. Children's privacy, even stronger. And, back up what you've said, it's been 20 years and maybe 25 years of people saying, we need to do something, and nothing has happened. Having witnessed it firsthand, I almost feel like I understand it less. Like we tried when I was in the Biden White House to pass privacy law. We had most of the Chamber of Commerce on our side. We had the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. We had, us, White House.
Who's standing in your way then? The janitor? Like, I mean,
The janitor lobby is actually,
what stopped it?
Actually, California stopped it in part, and Nancy Pelosi, because
Fucking Democrats.
Look at you.
they didn't like the fact that it was going to preempt California's law, and there was a sense California might do its own thing. So it was like a little bit of that. There was a personal dispute between Maria Cantwell, who was the chair of the Commerce. She didn't get along with the other Democrats or the Republicans, so they ganged up on her. They call each other rude names. We tried to have them come to the White House. They wouldn't do it. So it was actually like a bunch of really
that's
petty,
interesting.
stupid explanations.
So it wasn't like some, particularly effective lobby. It wasn't that, technology industry showed up en masse or anything else.
Yeah, no, in fact, I mean, they were quietly behind it. There were also some left-wing groups that, that was more on the child privacy side, who wanted, young LGBT youth to be able to search whatever. But actually, that was for child protection laws. No, a lot of it was really small things. It doesn't take much for Congress to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, we had so many things lined up. It doesn't take much. They really, I felt like ultimately all they were able to do right now is spend money. Or not spend money.
Or not spend money, as the case may be.
You get into AI a little bit, and
Before you go there, somewhere, I just want to go back to the idea of extraction for a second, because it's an interesting metaphor. Now, obviously, capitalism is by its nature extractive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, back to mining, we can go back as far as we want. It's always been the notion of taking out, taking resources, exploiting them, using them for other purposes. So the notion of extraction itself isn't new in this context. But I think what's interesting potentially is the idea that the ease with which we can extract has changed, right?
Yes.
Because it's more opaque, it's more algorithmic, it's less, it's less, I repeat myself, but it's less visible to people. And so it's not like watching a mine in your backyard or whatever else and saying, oh, they're taking all that stuff and taking it somewhere else. You don't see it. Do you buy so the extraction itself isn't new. What's new to your way of thinking is the opacity and algorithmic and velocity, all of these characteristics of the extraction.
I also think the emphasis on extraction as a business model is more dominant today. So extraction is an economic term as well as a kind of mining term, which you may be familiar with, which means you're able to capture value far in excess of the...
Right. That's what I mean. Like extraction industries are inherently extractive in an economic sense.
That's true, yeah. And, it's that feeling if you show up at the airport and you really need to go somewhere and they have empty seats, which for them there's no cost, but they're like, all right,
it still doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or so that I think there's been a spread of those sort of business models. But I also agree. I think that, and so I say in the book, is that the platform companies are the most sophisticated technologies of extraction ever invented. Or improved. I think they have. The first 10 years was getting the stuff like the
plumbing in place,
the stuff that work, the stuff that appeals to us.
Oh,
like,
I see.
You know what I mean? Like the first 10 years was to be appealing to consumers. The next 10 years was kind of trying to figure out less subtle ways, turning the dials to maximize extraction. And I agree with everything you say. It's like you realize, obviously, data, surveillance capitalism, I guess, is extracted, and just subtle sort of fees. weird tricks like that Amazon sponsored link thing. I mean, who would have thought of that? But you get sellers bidding against each other against their own margins.
Right.
Right. They're destroying their own margins. They're really fully realizing it because they desperately have to try to get a sale. And, and it's not even it's not from consumers, it's from sellers, although consumers ultimately pay.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway.
But I think I like that. I mean, so I'd take it further though and say the misallocation isn't just the notion of the extraction from the users of the users of this resource, that in an economic sense. It's also extractive in terms of employment, in the sense that there's a famous line, I forget who it was, Jeff Hasselblad or whatever his name was, years ago, where he talked about how the greatest minds of his generation were working to maximize extraction, or maximize
advertising
revenues from advertising these companies.
Didn't he say something like the greatest minds of my generation are trying to find ways to have people click on things they don't want to or something?
Yeah, it was about the ad optimization for people. But the
Yeah.
point being, though, so that was in service of making the algorithm more successful in terms of the things you're talking about. But there's a secondary effect, which was it was so successful that it created this great sucking sound, which pulled engineering, some of the most talented people. And so that becomes a snowball. So they become more effective at extraction. And these people who might be doing more productive, and you talk about this in the book, but more creative things instead are doing this. So there's these secondary spirals, right?
No, I agree with you. And I think it starts to become about how this nation's resources or productivity resources are allocated.
Yeah.
Where you have, in some ways, innovations which are not innovations of the kind we used to think of, like a better product or like a faster airplane or something, but more about weird methods of pricing that, manage to get money out. It's even hard to describe them.
But it's for me, the analogy is to capital markets again, because where they become very effective at extracting maximum rents from the users of the markets in ways that are relatively opaque and difficult to detect unless you're really inside the system. And so it's this financialization of the platform economy. I think that's the piece that people miss, is that has been imported into that world and then wedded to technology to do some of the same extractive effects.
Yeah, I guess that's why I call it the age of extraction, because I write mainly about tech platforms because they're obvious in front of us. But I do think we have moved to that kind of economy. I also teach business school, and the strategy classes are all basically about finding opportunities, to get somebody and
build them out and keep them there.
Yeah.
Just go back real quick to talking about the government for a moment.
Yeah.
And how difficult it is to get things passed. The ultimate extraction right now, of course, is artificial intelligence, right? And
why is that the ultimate extraction?
Because it's taking everything that we've done.
Oh, I see.
And using it to create new things.
Yeah.
How do you think it all plays out, and how in a scenario where, let's just say it's 2 years or 5 years or 10 years and all this job loss happens, and we've read all the same reports from McKinsey and this, that, and the other, and 200 million or 500 million, whatever the number is, how do we end up saving society from total collapse, whether it's I don't think it's an economic collapse. I mean, it's an economic collapse for certain people in a certain segment of society. But when we can't even pass a privacy law, how do we pass a UBI?
Yes, well, that's a very upbeat question.
Next inner dystopian comes out.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think there's a lot going on with artificial intelligence. I mean, look, obviously, I'm going to agree with your premise that a government that is disabled from doing anything, and if we end up with wealth imbalances that are so extreme and so much resentment, I mean, we haven't got there.
I mean, $1 trillion pay package for Elon.
As we move further on to a increasingly unfair, I mean, he hasn't earned that money yet, and could come crashing down. Although people have predicted that, and he has some ability to survive. I think that this was frankly democratic. What you're talking about is, we talk about market failure sometimes as political failure, where you have extraordinary inequality or unfairness in an economy, and people see it, they get mad, and I think democracy has to be able to address it somehow. Either by redistributing money, maybe, or by, as I've said, trying to limit the take of an essential service. I mean, the train is a good metaphor. In the 19th century, the train was new, powering a different kind of economy, but they had almost unlimited power over farmers and small business and other people. There was almost a revolution. This Granger movement in the 19th century of farmers who were like, this is insane. We can't pay this. And they could do whatever they want. They could charge whatever rates. They could discriminate between them and other companies, or just play them off against each other. So ultimately, Congress passed laws to limit discrimination and also force everyone to pay the same price and prevent price gouging. So, Congress and the government was able to do stuff then. And I'm agreeing with you, Nick. If we can't do something now, if we end up in a absolute dictatorship, we will have earned it, I guess.
Can I make a I don't know, a contrarian argument, sort of?
Oh, I love a good Paul contrarian argument.
No, I just think so. It's about AI, and I'm deeply in the Nick camp with respect to dystopian AI outcomes. But nevertheless, just to argue that Wikipedia is one of the largest sources of training data in all of the AI corpuses. So you might argue that it's ironic in a sense, obviously, given what's happened. But one of the reasons why it is because it wasn't a public company and it was mispriced content in a sense. Like you don't see them mining Amazon. That wasn't possible to do. But mining Wikipedia was very straightforward to do. If Wikipedia had been a public company that assiduously protected its data, the seeding of large language models would have been much more difficult. So in a perverse sort of way, Wikipedia, by staying in that structure that it had, actually made life so much easier for AI that you could almost take the reverse argument that that's part of the problem. If only they had gone public early in their history and priced their data properly, everything would be fine. So
you're saying that the road to the end of humanity was paved on the way with Wikipedia?
Yeah.
On the failure to hit the billionaire button?
On the failure to hit the billionaire?
I think... taking a more positive, taking a slightly more positive view, if you take AI as an advance, which it doesn't seem like that's our conversation here, but if it is interesting to me that every AI advance is linked to a public data set. I mean, going back to ImageNet and the training, that was a big...
That was a huge image data set.
Public image data set, I guess, out of Stanford. Was it Princeton or Stanford? And then...
Toronto was where it was actually first mined.
Yeah, Hinton.
Yeah,
and obviously a lot of the protein sort of efforts to do better protein, there's a public database. So, if you think about different as innovation policy, you need to have these public, if you think AI is good. So, I guess that's...
Well, I guess my point is somewhat different, which is that my objection to some of this stuff is the free rider problem of having these companies play fast and loose with the idea of whose content it is, and I'll deal with it after the fact and pay the fine.
Yes.
And that's with respect to proprietary content, but it applies equally to Wikipedia. If you imagine an alternative scenario where that data hadn't just been floating around freely for these people to ride freely on top of. And you could argue that the original sin here was that Wikipedia data was mispriced and AI follows.
But that's kind of making the argument that it's. I remember when
I'm not sure I believe that for a second.
But I remember when all these flux capacitors. What are the things in the
Back to the Future?
RAV4s? No, the RAV4s. in the Cadillac.
Catalytic converters.
So they're stealing, especially in LA. You get these people that drive around and they find all these hybrid cars and they steal the catalytic converters. And then there was a congresswoman here who argued that it was not the fault of the criminals. It was the fault of Toyota for allowing
it so easy to steal them.
Yeah, making it so easy to steal them. It's the fault of the fucking criminals. I think so.
Oh, you think I'm blaming the victim?
Yeah, I think you're blaming the victim. I think,
and also a lot of the data was honestly. Not just from Wikipedia, but from every book ever written.
Every book ever written. No,
that's
I'm being somewhat disingenuous, but my point is, it is interesting that one of the larger data sets out there was one that was, from an economic standpoint, was mispriced and then became a seed chunk of the AI training set.
Are you a pro AI person? Where are you?
That's a good question. I kind of want to see what it could become, if that's fair enough. In other words, what I don't like about AI, sort of philosophically, is I've always liked human augmentation technology better than sort of independent technology. I think we're tool-using creatures, sort of obviously, and stuff that makes us smarter or more capable or better at hitting a baseball over a fence is like things I think are awesome in technology. One of my problems with platforms is they've always kind of done what you say, but then they sort of have their own agenda as well. And so I like AI if it is kind of purely augmentative, like you have an agent that does exactly what you want. What I don't like is if AI is something that kind of is out of our control or, replaces me as a professor, let's say, that kind of thing. And I guess I think it could go either way right now. I think we're not totally clear. I'm not as dystopian, I think, as you guys on this, or maybe just having fun.
Did you see Jensen Huang's comments at GTC this week?
No.
So he very explicitly makes the case that this is all fairly pointless unless we're trying to replace people. And talks explicitly about the idea of taking a meaningful chunk out of global labor's total TAM, total available market. And so having people say these things out loud, even if they're nonsensical or unlikely, at least for me, is directional with respect to because intent matters, right? Technology is not some sort of neutral entity. It matters what people hopes and dreams are with respect to the things they're creating. And so I think that's important to know.
Well, also, I think on top of that, one of the founders of DeepSeek, the Chinese, said recently that that he believes that AI will drastically change everything about society within the next 10 to 20 years, and not for the better.
That's nice.
Well, people, as a historian of technologies, I have read a million of these things about the radio, about like
totally, but
radio did change things.
The radio did change. So did railroad. So.
Yeah, that's true.
It's funny. I remember my grandfather lived in England, in the north of England, in London. Sorry, in the 1900s, and he said he remembered they never had a lock on their door. I always remember him telling me this story. They didn't have a lock on their door. He'd walk in and out, and then one day his dad came home with a radio, and they put on the radio, and there's the news and everything. A week later, they had a lock on their door, and for him, it was this big moment of like, oh, you hear these things and they scare you, and you feel unsafe, and then you have to have a lock on your door. And I think, society. The thing that I've learned as someone who's written about tech for 25 years is that every technology has a good side and a bad side. Right. There's no technology that I can think of that's just good. Can you think of one? I can't.
Nail and hammer.
People get killed with hammers all the time.
Well, that's good.
That's true.
I actually thought dishwashers. Turns out people climb inside.
Yeah, that's actually a serious problem.
Yeah. Hair dryer. No, they cause fires.
Or they throw them in the bathtub.
Oh, stuff like there's literally
there's nothing.
There's nothing.
What about shoes?
Shoe bomber.
I didn't think about the guy.
Exactly.
That damn guy made me sit in TSA lines forever because of that guy.
Right. Think of the cost he's put out to all of us standing in all these lines.
Shoes are pretty good, but yes. Anyway, or the guy who threw the shoe at George Bush. I mean, it was a weapon.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And then Khrushchev with his shoe in the
banging on the table.
Weeks from now, I'm going to get a call from Tim. He's going to be like, "It's microphones."
And after that, I'll think of all the companies that didn't push the $1 billion button.
Exactly.
But I do think in this conversation and in a lot of talk about AI, there is a kind of error that a lot of people possibly are making.
Okay.
Which is there's a lot of linear projection based on the last 3 years that suggests AI just keeps on this kind of linear, upward trajectory. When most technologies, and we don't know when that is, they do start to bend.
This one's already bending.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is bending, but yeah.
The data's pretty clear that it already is. We were talking about it earlier today about how, training times are increasing, costs are increasing, and the delta per model on a benchmark basis is much smaller than it was in any prior iteration. So in a sense, that's already happening.
Yeah, and I read some of I read a lot of media and tech history, and like with the airplane, people are like, well, what are we going to do when we go to the moon by airplane? What's that going to be like? There's a lot of people talk about that kind of stuff, because they're just thinking, well, it's getting faster, the rocket ships to the moon. And, I guess, who knows what the limits, I guess they're ultimately physics. I guess like physics is kind of a bitch. It eventually
harsh mistress
stops like the,
but
maybe I shouldn't have said that, but anyway, and it gets in the way of the really good times that you project from a linear projection, which, yeah.
But do you have little kids, 9 and 12. Do you worry about the future for them, or do you think it's going to be great?
I would say I worry maybe a little less about technology than the
Really?
state of government.
But they are one and part and parcel
In a
of
way,
each other.
because I think that we got a little wiser. If we're just speaking about children, I think we wisened up a little bit to the dangers of social media and like totally unrestrained. You want to talk about a crazy time? It's like the 2010s where people are like, "Oh, get your kid a phone. That's the answer to all the problems."
Right.
So I feel like I am still a little scared when I meet other friends, teenagers who cannot seem to make eye contact. And have a regular like meal with adults, and like a lot of them,
Well,
and like have to.
You talk about this in the book, the laziness and the meat space, and you like. But you think that that's going to change, or
Maybe I just have a very deep love for my children, and I have trouble I have trouble thinking. I don't know. Maybe I'm not able to envision like them being harmed by things, but yeah, I maybe I gave a. Yeah, I just. I feel like we're a little wiser to children's dangers. I hope. I guess maybe I'm being optimistic. But am I hopeful about their economic future? No, not really.
because you think that AI will end up
Well, actually, I think my children. The problem is, I think like they'll either be
plumbers?
really, really wealthy, or they'll be really, really poor. And I guess what I'm worried about is like it doesn't feel like you can feel confident they're going to somewhere end up in some good middle place.
So can you talk about that a little more about this idea of there just being two different economic placeholders in society and what that looks like in your opinion?
Yeah, sure. This is a little dark, but I do think
we love dark here on the Nick, Tim, and Paul show.
Dark is our thing.
Well, in the same way that, frankly, democracy is like a blip and a rarity among human civilizations over time. Similarly, I think feudalism has been like the main system for most of human history, which is a small number of people controlling the means of product, like the land or the most valuable assets, and then everybody else. And I think their conditions have been created, and in some ways maybe we're going there, to have, in a sense, a two-class society, one full of one tech and other entities that have managed to either master the extraction technologies or work very closely with them, and then all the rest of the industries and businesses in the United States or the employees who are sort of in that second class. And I think it's very possible to imagine just a two-class society.
And history tells us that's profoundly destabilizing also. I mean, you think back to the 1920s, you can think back to Germany earlier in the late 19th century. These are very destabilizing moments in countries' history for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I mean, in the book I call it The Real Road to Serfdom, where I say, like, if you can't rebalance economic power, if people really start to get mad, that tends to set the stage for the autocratic dictator strongman who's like, no, I'm going to really help you out. I mean, we have a little bit of this going on right now, obviously.
And the U.S. is uniquely susceptible to that particular virus because there's this built-in ethos of that, everyone for themselves, and I can pull myself up. And I mean, the example of the new mayor in New York that I was reading a piece, I think it was in The Economist, talking about how they were a little bit baffled why he was causing such an uproar in New York because from a European mayoral standpoint, he was very middle of the road. He was very typical of what you might have. So the idea that he was somehow an extremist, leaving aside some of his other views, but specifically with respect to social policies and his sort of the economic views, was really striking because it didn't seem that. But that's a uniquely American phenomenon. This idea that individualism and anyone who's sort of going against that is going against the grain of what makes Americans, this shining city and this unique society is at least the argument.
Am I allowed to inject a note of optimism, however?
We would love a note of optimism. That's why we had you on, Tim.
Yeah, well...
Because you're always pretty. You always end with an optimistic...
on the positive, you said the United States is uniquely susceptible.
What if Tim turns around and says only 7.5 billion people are going to die?
Actually, you want me to something dark? I read a stat today.
No, I want to hear the dark thing. Go.
I read a stat today that right now only 12% of the world population is living on democracies, liberal democracies.
That's really only 12%?
Yes, it's this German study.
And declining. And
over 5 billion people are living in one or another kind of pure autocracy or some kind of, obviously, depends how you count India. China's obviously in there. Anyway, the note of optimism I have, and this is about America, is the United States has actually survived these shocks before. We have had extraordinary wealth imbalance at other periods, and everyone's like, it's coming to an end, and, beginnings of revolutions. A lot of our countries have, that had the revolution. In Germany, you mentioned, Tsarist Russia. United States has, maybe because it's revolutionary history, has an anti-monopoly kind of character to it. But, I talked about the railroads, progressive era, the New Deal. There have been times where someone representing basically the people successfully within the structure we have today managed to reverse things. So that's my optimistic note.
And I think it's an important note because in the 20s, it was that same kind of inequality had really taken hold. And granted, it led to a recession and the Great Depression. But on the other side of that was the New Deal and was a new relationship between the people, wealth, and a real flattening in terms of the inequality in the country.
And then a war. So all we need is a Great Depression and a world war, and then we're golden.
I think we're pretty on our way to the Depression, right? Are we getting close to that?
You think?
I wonder if we're going to look back this period and like, boy, we just thought things were great. And then, it seemed like we were, walking on water for a little while. And then all of a sudden we sank because there's a lot of weird stuff going on.
There's a lot of weird stuff. I think the weirdest thing that's happened is that as a result of technology, of course, is that you used to have TV personalities and you had journalists and you had politicians. And they were all different, you know, and everything's
commingled.
It's funny. It's like when I came out to Hollywood, I remember I would meet people like 11 years ago or something like that. And I'd be like, what do you do? And they'd be like, oh, I'm a director, writer, producer. And like they'd never done anything, but you can say that out here. You literally can just decide, like you, Paul, can just decide tonight that you are a writer, director, producer.
I don't want to be.
But you could be a documentarian. You don't have to have made anything
no, it doesn't
to
matter.
have done
As a
that.
matter of fact, you'd be in the majority if you haven't made anything.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and so it feels almost like now because of social media and tech and everything and these devices in our hands that we that politicians are, it's Trump but everyone is like that now. And I think it's like AOC. I think two reasons Mandami won, in my opinion, is he's excellent on social media. He's really entertaining and he is promising something that he can't deliver on, but he's promising this essentially what you just both said about this, that he can reverse things. And so my optimism, if we make it the next 5 years,
that's a huge proviso, just to be clear.
If we do, is that AI starts to take jobs, maybe we end up in war with Venezuela or China or whoever will figure that out, but Canada, but then I think you'll see society vote for someone who will then reverse things. But I think it's a big question of, as we've discussed, if we get there in time.
My most optimistic take on AI, and now I'm not talking politics, but goes back to our other thing, that it turns out not really to be good enough to fully take people's jobs.
Yeah.
And so it makes people better at their jobs are more productive.
Right, which is kind of a happenstance. It's not because people didn't want it to take jobs. They wanted it to, but it wasn't capable.
Do you think that's true?
I do, actually. I think, and this is the point earlier with respect to...
So you don't think it'll get good enough to be able to take our jobs?
Not in the large language model form.
It has to be something different.
It has to be something different because the architectural limitations of large language models are so dramatic in terms of training cycles, in terms of data sizes, data models required to generate, incremental improvements. All of those reasons mean that it's what's Jan LeCun's. Well, he just left. Did you see that, by the way? That Jan just left Meta.
Oh yeah.
Which is the funniest thing because he's like their chief AI scientist, and it's like, we're gone. So his point has always been that this is kind of an architectural dead end. It's a great trick, but there's inherently limitations. So I do think that in a weird way, not through want of effort, we may actually find out that the current incarnation of AI isn't enough to cause these problems.
And just stick on that, I also think the computational challenges of physical space are strong. And we've managed to get cars, which is very limited, or it's kind of amazing. But that there's so many other things we do in physical space, and sometimes we jump over that problem.
Oh, all the time. In this context, all the time, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And atoms are fairly resistant to those kinds of leaps.
Yeah, and so if we're to remain employed, it's because maybe because we have like good ability to negotiate in physical space. That sounds crazy. That's the only thing that keeping us here.
Plumbers.
But you talk about how because of the way technology has made it easy not to be in physical space, we're not.
Well, so that's true. I guess I'm talking about two different things. One is AI, and its full replacement of humanity and in jobs. And I'm saying our mastery of physical space actually might keep us in some jobs. Set plumbing is a good example, where you have to be a little bit more flexible or they need someone to help them.
Although my plumber the other day was using live streaming ChatGPT video as he did things, which I found really interesting.
Imagine if he just became a plumber like this week and he's still figuring it all out.
He's just bluffing?
He used to be like a hedge fund investor or something like that, or a journalist.
Yeah, that's right. He's just making it up as he goes.
But my politically optimistic thing is what I said earlier, is I think this country has almost a DNA of fighting off these things. We have to recapture it. We could fail. We could have the next election suspended and actually turn into a dictatorship. So that's all possible. Or we could have like people who legitimately promise to rebalance things a little bit. And I do think ultimately this country has, in its wealthier periods, a more distributed economy than just a few, big guys deciding everything.
And that you hope will be what the future looks like.
That is my most optimistic take, yeah.
That's not bad.
That's good.
I mean, I have a
live
sort
in
of
Tim's future.
political philosophy. I'm not anti-capitalism, but I'm into distributed capitalism, I guess. Because I'm kind of into,
Totally
a lot
agree
of
with
people being rich and whatever. Even just like in AI, we kind of have this weird world where there's like a small number of companies who are kind of like setting industrial policy for our whole country by deciding, all right, we're going to invest all these billions in this.
Exactly.
And like, it could be a big mistake, like a big waste.
Yeah.
I'm kind of more into more people trying to make decisions and try things than like
A few companies making massive decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
It does sort of feel like General Motors, the 50s, I don't know, deciding what we need is the bigger car, even bigger car.
Yeah, what's good for OpenAI is good for the country.
Yeah.
I have a friend who I felt this way about the LLMs reaching their limit, and then I have a friend who he's at Google, and he was telling me about them working on their quantum computers, and the AI is helping the quantum computer get better, and the quantum computer is helping the AI get better, and then I got freaked out again.
The intelligence explosion, where it starts like having a kind of intelligence.
Yeah, and then it just takes over the world.
I feel like I've been to your therapy session.
It's really been a few episodes of this. All right, we have a couple minutes left. Anything you want to get to before I have a last question for you? But anything?
Give me the last question. I'm ready for it.
I'm just curious. You've researched and written all these books about these technologies over time and everything. What do you think has been the most positive and what has been the most negative?
Oh, individually of moments or
moments, technologies, advancements in society, like what, when you look back at them all, you can go back to the 1900s, whatever.
Well, I know what's the worst. Cotton gin. That is, and actually it bears on our AI conversation a little bit because, I think you said that every technology maybe has good or bad sides. I also think what I've tried to understand in all my books, one is like the long cycles of political and economic power related to technology. This is a big, big theme. But another is the sense that a new technology interacts with the existing economic structure, and that can have a profound impact on how it affects us. And let me explain that a little better. In the book, I talk about two different technologies. One is the plow, the farming plow. That was invented many places at once, but it was an invention. And it made a lot of farmers richer than they were. I'm not saying like billionaires, but it made them able to plow much more effectively. And, and it appeared where it appeared, it had a real powerful effect, but a very distributed effect. The opposite is the cotton gin, which was invented in the early 19th century, which fortified the economics of plantation slavery and made it so that you could make a fortune, or the plantation owner could make a fortune with a huge plantation. And so I guess those sort of just happened. When it comes to a technology like AI or our platforms, I am a believer we want to push things in a certain direction. Basically, I'm loading the deck by saying away from slavery, away from trying to reinforce these structures. But I guess that's what I'd call the worst. Maybe that doesn't fully answer.
No,
your
it's a
question.
great answer.
Yeah.
And the best?
Well, the plow was his.
I had the plow,
plow.
but that's like all of human history. It's a little unfair. Maybe in my lifetime, my first thought went to my Atari 2600 when I was a kid.
See,
But
there
that
you
was,
go.
I think personal computer. I think
Yeah.
I think personal computer was kind of amazing. Very sort of 70s coded kind of thinking. It was all about everyone's going to have their own computer.
Yeah.
It was a kind of, as opposed to the computer is this thing that is inside a giant building that IBM or like the federal government controls. You're going to have it like Steve Wozniak kind of spirit.
Yeah.
Early on, you could mess with it and let people do things. I kind of like the personal computer, and then you own your data. I mean, the thing we've given up a lot since then.
Yeah.
You own all your stuff will be on your. Do you remember these things called like hard drives that had all your stuff?
Right
not
there.
the cloud. I don't
Yeah.
know if some of our listeners might not know about this, but you used to have your stuff on your actual computer. You used to own things. We also used to own like music collections,
Right. This was
book collections. Yeah.
back in the day.
We used to own things.
Yeah.
We did used to own things. People are always, whenever I'm doing a Zoom in here with all the books, people are like, is that an AI background? Like, no, they are real.
Those are real books, some of which you've read.
All of which he's read. There's one in Japanese there, so.
That's mine in Japanese.
Oh.
That I wrote.
Sugoi ne.
Yeah, there you go.
Throw some Japanese.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much, Tim, for coming on. This has
thanks for
been
coming.
really amazing to have you. And the book is The Age of Extraction, How Tech Platforms Conquered the Economy and Threatened Our Future Prosperity. Tim, you are always an amazing guest, and you always write an amazing book.
It's great to see you again, Nick.
Good to see you too.